Hello, I'm Pierre Himmel, and this is my media presentation. Basically, what I'm covering today will be the impact of the Eagle Protection Act and Migratory Bird Treaty Act on the Hopi and Tewa religion. The Hopis have a tradition or history of using eagle feathers, hawks, owls, and other types of birds, including vultures and both usually golden eagles. They also use like bluebirds and different types of yellow birds, even magpies and crows for different religious ceremonies and dances and prayer offerings. Usually, the most common type of bird used is the turkey. Both the tails and the body feathers are used to uh, create prayer offerings. They're called bajos and different types of also like costumes and headdresses. They'll adorn the usually the headdress. Um, one of the one thing that is actually pretty distinctive about Hopi culture is that they actually capture live uh, chicks, hawk and eagle chicks, and they get them from uh, the mesas and the cliffs, and they get the hatchlings, and they bring them down, and they'll actually raise those hatchlings um, up on the rooftops. They use these, or they raise them up until July, which is when the home dance happens. At the end of the ceremony, they'll take these. Now they're pretty much full grown, or the young juvenile eagles and hawks. Then they smother these eagles and hawks, and they take them down. They pluck the feathers, and then they bury the bird like it's a person. And there's usually a certain area where they're going to bury it. I'd like to read quickly from uh, one of the, it's by Voth. Um, he says the large feathers are used on masks, standards, altars, arrows, shafts, and for many other purposes. The typical Hopi sun symbol is profusely decorated with eagle tail feathers, which in this case represents the rays of the sun. In the great flute ceremony, every flute player wears such a sun symbol on his back as part of his ceremonial costume. He also wears on the head a ring of corn husks into which are thrust eagle breath feathers, while other participants in this, and in fact in most Hopi ceremonies, have a smaller eagle feather fastened to the scalp lock. So basically the eagle feathers are used in all types of Hopi ceremonies. Um, and they go from the long feathers that would like you see during powwows, which are on the bustles that they'll wear during the traditional dance, or the eagle fans, but also the body feathers and fluffs. I know you see during like women will usually wear like the eagle fluff. They'll wear it in the back. Hopis have a similar thing where they'll wear large eagle fluffs, or maybe just one, but they also use like all the body feathers, and all those body feathers will be used for different things, usually ceremonial offerings. And Voth actually talks about that. The bones will also be used to create whistles. The Plains Indians will do the same thing with the sun dance. They'll use the bones for eagle whistles. Um, Now this has gotten some Hopis into trouble. This trying to gather the eagles for to use for ceremonies and not going through the right permitting process. So right now the use of eagle feathers is controlled by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, but also the Golden Eagle, or the Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Protection Act. Well, I guess the golden eagles were included under the Bald Eagle Protection Act. In 2006, Bara Tawahangwa was a defendant. He actually appealed his case to the United States District Court in Arizona. He filed a case to dismiss his violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Uh, The judge held the defendant did not have standing to assert the defense that the Migratory Bird Treaty Act permitting system violated his constitutional right to the free exercise of religion. And the Religious Freedom Restoration Act did not prohibit defendant from being prosecuted under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act for failing to obtain a permit prior to taking golden eagles. So his motion was actually denied. And part of the civil rights discussion was that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act did not prohibit Hopi Indian defendant from being prosecuted under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act for failure to obtain a permit prior to taking golden eagles. The defendant's free exercise of his religion, although slightly burdened, was not substantially burdened by the requirement that he acquire a permit from the Hopi tribe. So basically, Hopis are able to gain access to the fledgling eagles, but they have to go through the permitting process. And actually, the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife will hold meetings. The last one was held in November 13th, 2017. They actually held it at the Shimopavi Community Building, which is on Second Mesa on Hopi in Arizona. If you kind of know the area, it's in the Four Corners. And the United States Fish and Wildlife Service actually met with the Hopi tribe, with the people, the actual community people, and the representatives from the National Eagle Repository, discussing these issues. Part of it was to potentially delegate authority from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to tribes to process and decide on applications for eagle feathers for tribal enrolled members. And the recent federal court decision allowing non-federally recognized tribes and state tribes and non-Native American Indians ineligible to apply and use eagle feathers. Anyway, the action requires Hopi tribes need input and comments. So basically, there's some changes coming, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife was meeting with the Hopi tribe and the community members. They actually had 3 meetings at the different villages to discuss the new changes and ways that actually might benefit the tribe, especially the potentially delegating authority from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife for tribes to process. So the Hopi tribe might actually be able to give members permits that will be recognized, where they can gather eagle feathers, potentially eagle parts, and maybe whole eagles, and then continuing the tradition of live eagle gathering where they raise them up. And this has been in practice for, before the Europeans came, and even before other tribes entered the area. If you go to www.hopi-nsn.gov and go to the Department of Natural Resources, it actually describes what they consider the Hopi land base and kind of the history of a little bit of the history, the natural resource environment of the tribe. But one of the villages has been there for probably over 1,000 years, and that's Oraibi. And other villages, I know the one I'm from, Tewa, they did dating on the rafters in one of the houses, the house that when they remodeled it, and it was 500 years old. So that's a lot of these villages on Hopi have been there for a long time. I know a lot of Pueblo villages have either been in the area where they're at, or sometimes in the same location for 1,000 years. I believe Acoma has been there for a long time, and I know a lot of the Pueblos had to relocate during the Pueblo Revolt, but then oftentimes came back to their original areas. So you can see that there is a process, or there's impediments to being able to get eagle feathers. Hopis have been prosecuted. I know currently on one of the Hopi websites it says that you're able to gain, or the Hopis were giving out about 40 permits to gather live eagles, but that covers 4 village, or I let's see, there's 12 total Hopi villages on 3 mesas. There's over 14,000 members, and so there's only 40 live eagle permits given. Now I know that eagles are protected and they're a limited resource. You can't expect to give every member or every male member an eagle, but usually this was limited to certain members of certain clans and certain societies that decided or that would use these eagle feathers in such a manner. I know Voth points it out that it was just it was the eagle cult, and it was just a certain few clans. He said Voth points out there are eagle clans, Kachina clans, and special prayer offerings for the eagles and eagle burial grounds. But it was usually just a few clans that owned certain areas that they would go out and get the eagles from. Anyway, here we go. It says the specific clans are the bear, spider, reed, young corn, burrowing owl, bluebird clan, bow clan, lizard clan, badger clan, and eagle clan of Aribi that controlled eagle territory. So that's actually not all the clans. I believe there's 30 plus clans out at Hopi, and not all of them traditionally gathered live eagles, but all of them would use eagles. And oftentimes these feathers that they get from one eagle will be distributed amongst multiple male members, and people will borrow each other's feathers for these ceremonies. So oftentimes for one ceremony, like one set of feathers will be used for multiple things, for multiple ceremonies, because they're precious and hard to come by. And sometimes some people will get like the whole eagle body when they apply through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or they'll get eagle parts. Those eagle feathers may be used in multiple ceremonies by multiple people, because you have to wait at least 3 years. The waiting is a long time to get the eagle feathers. Another issue I wanted to discuss besides the eagle feathers was there is the permitting process, which you go through the National Eagle Repository, which were actually those same people we discussed earlier a little while ago who put on the meeting with the National Eagle Repository. There's permitting done through them, but there's actually another permitting system. See, Hopis don't just use eagle feathers, they use hawk feathers, they use crow feathers, they use various types of feathers. So they both have to go through the process of going through the Hopi Natural Resources Department, which controls hunting and fishing. There's actually one pond on Hopi you can go fishing at, and you can get permits to do that, and it's stocked. But because they have to, Hopis use other feathers, they call them flickers, and of course they have to get turkey feathers. They'll often do that by getting permits, hunting permits, just through the normal hunting process that you do through the state of Arizona or New Mexico or any other state. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has other ways of gathering, and it's a different permitting process, and they actually have it for different migratory birds. And the application looks pretty similar to the eagle feather application. You just have to put down your purpose while you're applying, and you may actually get a permit to take various types of birds, or if they have carcasses. I don't think they currently gather those carcasses, but I know you're able to do an application. Sometimes Hopis will use owls for certain things, and here I have a Fish and Wildlife permit application form. So you have to complete it as the individual or representing an organization. So part of this, though, which I think is kind of prohibitive, is you also, it says here in the application, any permit issued as a result of this application is not valid unless you also have any required state or tribal